Hey guys, it's Ali. Welcome back to Infertile, the podcast. This is episode 157 called Loree.
Hello, everybody. This is Ali and Blair, the co-founders of Fertility Rally, and we are here to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we can support you on your infertility journey.
So we wanted to let you know that Fertility Rally is the membership group that we created. It's the place we wish we had when we were in the thick of it. We offer support groups. We have private Facebook groups. We have tons of events, lots of videos, blog posts, so much content. We're starting to do IRL events as well. And we want to be there for you no matter where you are on your journey.
Yeah, our favorite part, we had no idea where this would go when we started it. And our favorite part about it is watching all of our members, which is like 300 plus at this point, connect and create true lifelong friendships. We have members that are meeting up in real life. We have members that are supporting each other on Instagram. We have members that call each other best friends now. And honestly, like that is the most rewarding thing to see. We had no idea it would go here. And so we're inviting you to join the Rally fam.
Yeah, it's such a great space. It's a safe space. We also have fun when we can. So we would love for you to be a part of it. Check us out on fertilityrally.com and on Instagram at fertilityrally. Hope to see you guys soon.
Today's episode is presented by Belly. Belly offers modern prenatal vitamins optimized for fertility, prenatal, and post-pregnancy health. To learn more about how to optimize your fertility and pregnancy health, check out their vegan-friendly, dairy-free, non-GMO vitamins for both men and women at bellybaby.com. That's spelled BELIBABY.com. The best part, if you use code ALI15, you'll get 15% off your first month of either Belly Women or Belly Men. Again, that's code ALI15, ALI15 for 15% off. Thanks, Belly. All right, everybody. So today I am talking to the lovely Dr. Loree Johnson, who's a therapist specializing in reproductive health. She's really well-versed in healing from infertility and pregnancy loss, and she's going to tell us her own story today and how she is helping other women as well. So today, Loree's going to tell us about all the things, including her 6 rounds of IVF, a very, very devastating second trimester loss when they had to terminate for medical reasons, and so much more. How she met her husband, her incredible motorcycle, and what it's called. She's just a very cool, dynamic woman, and she is out there helping people deal with their infertility and grief. And she's also talking a lot about Black maternal fetal medicine and what she's doing to raise awareness with that and hopefully change that. So we talk about the disparities, in health coverage, depending on your race and all of that. So it's very interesting. Loree's awesome. So thank you guys for listening. And without further ado, this is Loree's infertility story. All right. So thank you so much for doing this. I'm so happy to talk to you today.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you too.
Absolutely. I love your Instagram. I want to start with that and just say that, so you're a therapist and you specialize in reproductive health, talking a lot about infertility and pregnancy loss and what you've been through and, helping others. But I love your posts because they're so informative and you're very consistent. And I know I can always come to your account to find really good information and all that kind of stuff. So tell me, when did you start your Instagram?
That's a good question. I probably, I had a professional Instagram, account I started about maybe 5 years ago, but I didn't really focus it on reproductive health or loss until I had kind of turned a corner personally in my journey and decided to focus more on reproductive health and loss in my private practice. Because while I had a toe in the infertility and loss world, I didn't fully dive in until after I had kind of processed, the majority of my losses and felt more kind of open and present to hold space for others. And so I think I kind of made my debut in I think the fall of 2019.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. A few months before the panorama.
The panorama. That makes it sound fun.
I know. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm just so, I'm so sick of the heaviness around the word pandemic and what that's done to us. And so I don't want to minimize it, but I feel like I need to bring some levity to
I love that. Let's call it the panorama from now on.
The panorama.
Sure. Well, speaking of levity, so you did this great post too recently where you were kind of reintroducing yourself and all these interesting facts. Tell everybody, I just read this, but tell everybody how you met your husband. It's so cool.
Yes. I love telling this story because I met him during my year of yes. And I always say that this was my year of yes before Shonda Rhimes wrote her book about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I was, I had just finished I just gotten licensed as a marriage and family therapist. I had just finished my PhD all within a few months of each other. And I decided, you know what, I'm sick of being a professional student. It's really time to start living life. And so I just started saying yes to everything. And part of that was I just started, I noticed there were other like motorcycle riders and female riders everywhere I would go. And I ridden on the back of motorcycles before. And so I was just like, you know what, I'm going to take a motorcycle class. And then I started learning how to ride motorcycles. And so part of my journey in motorcycle riding was I was part of a riding group. And before I had my license, I was considered a passenger. And so sometimes what would happen is we would look for people to pair up with. So riders would reach out to passengers or vice versa for a ride. And so my husband saw my picture and reached out and said, hey, do you want to go for a ride? And I'm like, well, yeah, but I need to meet you first because I'm not getting on the back of your 700-pound bike without knowing a little bit more about you. And so that was kind of all she wrote.
Oh my gosh. And you have a purple motorcycle and tell everyone what it's called.
Yes. So my motorcycle's name is called Purple Rain. And in case you don't know,
brilliant.
I'm a huge Prince fan. My favorite color is purple. And so it was only fitting to name my motorcycle after Prince.
Oh my God. So do you still ride? And where are you in New York?
No, I'm in California. I'm in LA.
Oh, that's right. Okay. But you went to school in New York, right?
I went to school in upstate New York.
Got you. Okay.
I haven't ridden her in a long time because, I've lost a little bit of my confidence going through some of the things that I've gone through in my journey. I still ride with my husband periodically. And I did get on her and kind of, rev up her engine from time to time. But yeah, now just having a little one, my priorities have changed. And so I don't ride as much and that's hard, but she's still there in the garage, not getting rid of her. And I'm still looking at her longingly and right. waiting for the day when I can take her out again.
I love it. I love that. Okay. So fast forwarding a little bit, when did you and your husband, who became your husband then, start talking about having a family, and what happened when you guys started to try?
So ironically, when we first met and I knew that we were interested in each other more than just, we were interested in each other romantically and more so than just, hey, we're going to ride as a group. And I, had a conversation with him very early on about, whether he was open to having more children. And, I knew I didn't want that off the table for me. But I said it in a way where I was like, you know what, we don't know where this is going, but I also, we were older and it's like, I just want to make sure that we're not wasting each other's time. So we had that conversation relatively early about our openness, what that would look like. And we were on the same page about it. And so when we decided to get married, or closer to the time where we decided to get married, and talking about like if there were issues or like we revisited the topic, it was like, well, we're okay if it's just us, and if it happens, it happens. And then after we got married, 6 months after we got married, and I got pregnant the first time, it did start to happen. And then the losses, that was the first of 4 losses. So we kind of got swept up into this world that we didn't anticipate. I think we were both naive, and he has children obviously and had never experienced a pregnancy loss. And here, and I had heard about it and worked with women who had struggled with pregnancy loss, but still never thought that it would be part of my story.
Right.
And yeah.
I'm so sorry. I had 4 losses as well. between my
I'm
daughter
sorry.
and my son. My daughter's now 12 and my son is now 6, and I had him through IVF. But yeah, four
Oh,
losses. So I can relate to you on that one. But do you mind if we kind of unpack that a little bit and talk about your
sure.
losses? And like with the first one, did you feel kind of like, okay, like I know a lot of people who've had miscarriages before, and this is kind of, that was how I felt. Like I was like, I have a lot of friends
Yeah.
who have, and I feel like it's kind of like a rite of passage in a weird way. Like it didn't seem
Hmm.
that wild to me that it had happened. And my whole thing was that I got pregnant very easily, but I had a hard time staying pregnant. So
Yes.
tell
Yes.
me about your situation, please.
Yes. So, I think it's very similar to yours in the sense because I did get pregnant relatively easily. And I struggle saying that in this community because I know sometimes it's just it's hard to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I was really surprised by how much I was affected by my first pregnancy loss.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tried to tell myself, okay, you've seen this before. We know the statistics, and so trying to really therapize myself, and in a way, and trying to intellectualize what was happening. But there was an element to my pregnancy loss that was really traumatic that I didn't really give myself space to process initially because I had what was called a missed miscarriage. And so in some ways, my body was still registering that I was pregnant, but the baby, wasn't developing. And then on top of it all, I decided to miscarry naturally. And so by the time that happened, and I was, the process was really traumatic and it wasn't what I was expecting. And I think sometimes what they say is like, oh, it's just going to be like a regular period. And it wasn't, it was far from it. And so when I think about what I went through physically, and I can remember where I was and, just the, looking at what happened and all of that. I don't want to get into a lot of the gory details, but all I know is I was like, this isn't what the nurses told me,
Mm-hmm.
this is not what it was like. And so after that, I felt like, it was just this weird kind of experience that I was, processing, alone for a bit because I kept thinking, well, it's really common, this happens. And then I was like, why am I feeling so sad around everybody? And so it was this really disconnected, disjointed experience
Right.
that was happening. That I was like, wait a second,
Yeah.
this is a loss. That's it. I get to process it that way.
Yeah. I think a lot of women go into it not knowing what to expect. And even like you said, without going into the details of it, just like what actually happens to your body. And,
Exactly.
and going through it and being like, what is this? Like, what is that?
Exactly.
It's
Totally.
it can be so, that's why I love that, you're talking about this and that, we can reach out to so many other people in this community now who are open about it because it like normalizes things that, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about, or 5 years ago, even, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
how is your husband doing with the losses?
He was doing okay. I mean, the first one, I think that was, it was a little bit of a shock. And then, we took some time off and just kind of enjoyed each other's company. And, and so I think the second loss was really what stands out for the both of us because for your readers or listeners, excuse me, who may not know, I had a second trimester loss that was termination for medical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found out, thank you. And so we had found out late in my first trimester, they were late with doing my first trimester screening. And so the blood work came back that there was an issue with the baby. And so here I had already rounded the corner in the second trimester. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of breathing a sigh of relief that, that usually, people do at that stage, it was just wrought with, more doctor's appointments, conversation with genetic counselor, more diagnostic testing. And, and then unfortunately the decision to terminate. And so that was, I think, more traumatic in a different way because not only were we dealing with the loss of the pregnancy and the expectations and the hope of, of what this pregnancy was going to be, but we were also dealing with the perceived kind of judgment that, some people had about terminating a pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that doesn't really get talked about as much. And sometimes because of the certain diagnoses that, some losses are, our medical losses are okay, but others aren't. And so it really kind of drove, both of us a little bit kind of deeper underground, so to speak, in terms of who we would talk to about it, the circumstances surrounding it. And when you're not able to talk fully about, the elements of your story, it doesn't help you heal,
Right.
and so I carried a lot of shame around it. I think both of us were very clear that we wanted to, we knew that we had to make a very heartbreaking choice, but we were okay with shouldering that burden as parents, because we didn't, we weren't given great odds. And we just could not put our son through any kind of trauma after birth. And so we were okay with making that decision and still feel good about it, even though we know that there are people out there that don't really agree with what we did and have, been very subtle and sometimes not so subtle about it. But that definitely complicates the journey. And I think really, has informed, how I work. Because it's just so important to, for people to be able to tell all parts of their story. And you can't do that if you're carrying around shame and guilt.
Absolutely. And, for anybody who has to go through termination for a medical reason, and my heart just goes out. I mean, it's such a awful decision to have to make as a parent or an intended parent. And, I'm really sorry that you went through that. And my thought is just people just need to mind their own beeswax and
exactly. Yeah, totally.
This is your story and this is your body and this is your baby. And I don't think anybody except your husband and your doctor, has the right to weigh in on it. It's like,
exactly. No, I don't. And you know what? It's so interesting because, I've always been kind of pro-choice and and I know it's weird to hear kind of pro-choice and pro-life. People think that you can't be both, but I never thought that I would be in that situation where I would have to make that choice. And I always thought, I would never make that choice for myself until it happened to me.
Right.
And, we were faced with what we were faced with. And this is what, his life would look like, and it's like that in and of itself felt inhumane.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
I
mean, it's so sad to think that anybody has to go through that, but I would have done the same thing. So, how did you guys heal from, I mean, you never really fully heal, right? But how did you grieve that? And how did you, continue to go about your days? Cause that's such a loss.
It is such a huge loss. And I think the days, right after the termination, which happened on a Monday, because I remember I did go back to work relatively soon after. And I think I again had this, part of my coping is to kind of, throw myself more into work and kind of keep busy. And I think that my husband did that too. And I think we had this kind of delayed reaction. And I thought that, I did what I like a lot of other people do, and that's try to get pregnant again, as quickly as possible, thinking, not realizing that, wait a second, my body might have needed a little bit more time. I think at that point, I was also feeling the pressure of my age and then at that point, it's like we started doing IVF. And so I don't think I got a chance to, or we had a chance to fully grieve until we went through a year and a half of IVF treatments and suffered 2 more losses. And then it was like, okay, you know what, we really need a break. And, and in between that, I think part of our outlet, aside from work, was we kind of, threw ourselves into home renovation projects, just trying to make our space beautiful. We were traveling and definitely found an outlet in being, in other cultures and just taking in, things that we didn't normally see and experience. And so, and then just continuing to hold space for each other.
Right.
He just held me a lot while I cried and we did some therapy and, and I had to learn that he grieved very differently than I did. And so even though I kind of knew this intellectually and, would say this to my clients, it's like, it's always hard to therapize yourself. You might have all the tools, but there's a reason why, we say, you don't treat family members or people close to yourself because you just don't have that sense of perspective. And I didn't and so I didn't have that sense of perspective for myself. And, so that was.
That's so interesting. Can we talk about making the transition to doing IVF treatments? So was that like a hard decision for you, or how did those talks go down at home? And like, were you guys both on the same page?
We were on the same page. It was hard because, I knew because of my age, I wasn't the best of candidates. I was having, I had a diminished ovarian reserve at this point. And, and I was dealing with that reality coupled with the reality of, well, I've gotten pregnant, each time I quote unquote wanted to get pregnant. I got pregnant either that month or the month after. So it was almost like a struggle with, well, do I really need to do this? And so by that time, I just figured, what, let's just do it. Let's try to kind of fast track it or speed up the process, because I just didn't know how much time we had left. And but I think when I was doing it, it was still, I didn't kind of qualify for that. I didn't do well with the full protocol. And so I ended up doing a protocol where it's called kind of a minimal stimulation or moderate stimulation kind of protocol, which takes longer and can be more frustrating. But yeah, I think we were on the same page. It was just, I think when you're on the front side of IVF and you think about what it entails, it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to we're going to do some injections and they're going to make an embryo and then we'll have a baby. And there's still this naivete.
Totally. I remember thinking like, oh, this is like a sure thing.
Yes.
It's so far from that for so many people. Can we talk about how many like rounds you did and all that?
So we ended up doing 5 rounds, or excuse me, 6. At the first go round, it was 5, and then we took another break, and then did another round, and then that's where we got our son right now. But yeah, it was 5 initially before we took a break, and I needed a break after that because I had 2 losses from IVF. Or excuse me.
So had you gotten pregnant and then had losses again?
So I had one failed cycle, and then I had 1 chemical pregnancy. And then after all of that, I was like, I'm done. Yeah. And I was like, let's just try naturally. And they ended up doing tests. And ironically, Ali, they showed that I had tubal blockages, like 1 blockage on the left and then 1 full blockage and then a half blockage on the right. And they're like, well, if you want to get pregnant, you're going to have to do more IVF. And I was like, I'm not doing it. Ended up getting pregnant like miraculously 2 months later. And then that pregnancy ended again. And so it's been a roller coaster.
Absolutely. And your body's been through so much and emotionally too, it's just so hard. I know that you've talked a lot about like navigating the trauma and grief of infertility. And I'm glad that we are, it's starting to become more normal to attach the word trauma to it. Because this is a traumatic experience that people go through. So can you tell me a little bit about when you talk about how to navigate, like what are some of the tools that you would use or some of the things that you can share with people listening who might be going through it right now?
Yes. So I knew for me, the ways that trauma can show up, it can manifest in terms of how you're eating, how you're sleeping, reactions that you might be having to other people who have families or who are pregnant. Also, another way that I noticed it coming up for me and for others is just like even struggling, like going back to the doctor or to that doctor's office. And then just really intrusive thoughts. For some people, it gets really dark and, have just really, these intense thoughts about how, what their life, or just feeling really hopeless. And so I think trauma can be an emotional experience. It can be a very physical experience. And I think it really differs, for the person. It's also about how you're experiencing it too. So even though, I might experience symptoms one way. I realize that it might show up very differently for somebody else. So they're, and they might not experience it as traumatic, but, it's just another way of trying to help people language what's going on so that you can kind of recognize that the heaviness that you're walking around with, or the emotional reactions that you're having, the tearfulness, that you can't necessarily control. It's like you're those memories or, those reactions are getting stored in your body in a way that, it's letting you know that something's going on. And so it's like learning how to pay attention to that and really working with that. And so part of what I, have done with my clients is, done a lot of psychoeducation about what does trauma look like, or what can it look like for people. And then also seeing what have they tried, so that we're not like, reinventing the wheel and thinking about like, what else, what techniques they've already used that maybe just need a little bit of tweaking. And then what I did was I actually went and got trained in a trauma modality called EMDR. And, so I've been utilizing a lot of techniques around building up emotional resources that I think really help kind of blend the whole like mind-body connection I think we've heard so much about, but helping people understand and learn how to what we call regulate and reprocess.
Okay. Is EMDR the thing with the eyes?
Yes. The eye.
Okay. Can we talk about that a little bit more? I'm fascinated with this. I heard Prince Harry talking about it.
Oh my goodness. That's right.
Because he used it and he's like a big, proponent of it. So tell me more about EMDR.
So EMDR basically stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it is a trauma approach that works in phases. And it's really focused on honoring the fact that our bodies actually already know how to heal. But what happens is these traumatic events kind of interrupt its natural kind of healing process. And so they kind of get stored in these in ways that are kind of unproductive or not very helpful.
Like, and physically or mentally or both?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
Yes. So what that means is it really helps people kind of, heal from symptoms or emotional distress that's the result of what are perceived as, these disturbing life experiences. And so what you might see people talk about like moving your eyes or even like tapping. And sometimes people kind of compare EMDR to emotional freedom techniques, which also involves tapping. But it's different because we're dealing with what we call memory networks and how those memories kind of link up to create, or try to not necessarily create, how they link up to in terms of how we like process. So what information are we taking in? And then what are we doing with that? And we try to kind of work with that or shift that a little bit so that, again, the information gets processed what we call adaptively, and people can look at the fact that, oh my gosh, I had this really traumatic experience, but they're no longer feeling the same charge with that. They recognize it as, okay, it was a disturbing event, but I don't have to relive it. And that's the difference with this approach. It helps people not relive it in such a way where they're having to, they're back in the throes of their trauma, they're dysregulated, their breathing is off, or they're having flashbacks, or they're just triggered all over the place. It's more like, okay, this is really uncomfortable and really unfortunate, and I'm sad that I had to go through this, and I'm okay. That's kind of the qualitative difference between or we try to shift people to from one state to a more kind of regulated, kind of positive space.
It's so interesting. I want to know much more, but I need to do a deep dive and figure out more about that. Have you done it yourself?
I have. I did it around, there was a lot of stuckness I was having around grief. Yeah. And so, I talk a lot about grief in my account because I don't believe you can talk about infertility without talking about grief, because it's the loss of how you thought you were going to grow your family. And then, on top of that, it's just at every turn, there's a loss. And so, and what I think happened for me because of, what happened around my termination, that was a lot of disenfranchised grief. I didn't feel, safe to talk about the details with everybody for the longest time. And there's some people who probably still think of my loss as a miscarriage and don't know the details about it. And that's directly related to, conversations, judgments, things like that happened around the time that we lost, our son.
Mm-hmm.
So that created this stuckness for me. And also I think what happens too, it's like you get to a point where you are, like, well, if I let go of the grief, well, what else will I have?
Mm-hmm.
And can I still honor my child, if I don't have it? And it's like really learning that you can, I do think that you can. I know a lot of people think you can't get over grief, and I agree with that to some degree. I feel like what you can do is make it a more kind of adaptive experience, so that you're not, continually overwhelmed by it. You recognize the sadness and you honor the sad moments. And you also kind of honor the strength that goes along with that, the strength and the resilience.
Oh, wow. I love that.
And so that's what I feel like EMDR helped me do and learn that, I don't have to relive the trauma of saying goodbye to him to still honor him. Sometimes we kind of refer to EMDR as like magic, with some of the techniques. And what I love about it too is that you don't really have to talk a lot about what you experience. Sometimes we're even just looking at where, what is your body saying? Like what sensations are you noticing? And we can target that. So it's a beautiful process that I think, or approach that I think can really be helpful.
Right. So interesting. Okay. So let's go back to your story. So I know that your rainbow baby did make his debut.
Yes.
July 2021. Is that right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. July 23rd. Yes.
I'm cheating. I'm looking at your Instagram. But, so tell me about how it all went down with him and was this another IVF round or?
Yes.
Okay.
This was we had done another round. I kind of lost track of the time with the panorama and everything, but I know we did another round.
The panorama.
There was another round that was done long before the panorama and we had stored it, but I just couldn't face anything. And then, we were still on this, what I called our grief tour. I was just traveling a lot and that was another way that we were just nurturing our relationship.
Okay.
So
were you riding bikes?
We were not riding bikes. We were riding bicycles, in the countryside of Greece, but no motorcycles,
no purple rain,
no purple rain. And so when the panorama hit, it really kind of got us thinking. It's like, okay, this is it. We're either going to do it or we're just, we're not. And so we walked into the cycle. We started on the panorama hit in March. And I think we started prepping in July. And then it was like, and then we had a couple of bumps but we transferred him in December and it took, and I was just like, I wasn't, wait, what? Like
it worked.
It worked.
Yes. Tell me about getting that call that, you had a good beta, or did you test at home?
Yes, I did not test at home. And it was so funny because I had tested before and my doctor knew I would, I had done before. So when I was getting my blood work done and she had walked by and she was looking at me like with a thumbs up kind of, like a tentative thumbs up. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I just shrugged and I was like, well, we'll just see. And I got the call. Well, we got the call later. And, because I couldn't wait for my husband to listen to it. And so it worked. My numbers came back really strong. And, so that started, we all, we talk a lot about, anxiety after pregnancy loss. And,
yes.
I think when you've got anxiety after multiple losses, that can kind of stir up a lot of old stuff. So, I was kind of thrown back into this anxious space again, but it was, it took me a while to find my footing, but it worked obviously. And
right.
He's here.
Oh my gosh. So was there ever a point where you were able to relax during that pregnancy with him?
Oh, so unfortunately, I did not relax much because, I had some really bad morning sickness. I wasn't diagnosed with HG. I didn't have it that, severely, but in some ways I relaxed in the sense that I knew my body was doing what it needed to do, but I was so sick that, just nauseous all the time, just laying down when I couldn't work, when I wasn't working. It was not enjoyable. And then when I got to the 20-week scan, then come find out that I have another condition that we had never known about. And I had an insufficient cervix, or cervical. And so it already started to dilate. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So when you kind of, and the other part that makes this even more troublesome is that, I kind of, when we were diagnosed, when our son 6 years ago was diagnosed with a chromosomal issue, like literally that affects like 1% of the population. So you're like, okay, you're part of that 1%. Thank you. No, thank you. And then here again, like, the whole diagnosis of, I think we know it by incompetent cervix, but we're trying to rename it to cervical insufficiency that affects like 1% or a very low percentage. So I'm like, here I am again, falling in this low percentage of, things that are happening to people. And so that became another anxious kind of watch, because, at first they were treating it with just progesterone support because I hadn't made it this far. They didn't know if I needed a cerclage or not. And then come find out 2 weeks later, I needed an emergency cerclage, and those aren't necessarily what doctors like to do.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it was pretty harrowing for the second half of my pregnancy, and so, it was hard to really relax. And then the countdown kind of began in terms of just getting to viability. And then after that, it's like each week it was like, okay, we've got less time in the NICU. And, we're just trying to make it as far to, as close to 37 weeks as possible, because that was my target, for my scheduled C-section because of previous surgeries that I'd had. They wanted to make sure that I didn't go into labor. And then unfortunately, I still went into early labor, and it turns out I had a ruptured uterus at 36 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's how, he decided to come on his own, but it was pretty scary because, with the rupture, and the doctors did a great job, but yeah, it was.
And how is he doing now?
He's great. So, we still had to treat him like a late term preemie, even though he was born, like 6 pounds. Almost 7 pounds. And he's thriving. He's sitting up right now.
Well, one thing I want to talk about before we wrap is, that you are very outspoken about, and I think is such an important issue, is, statistics about Black maternal health. And you had a really good post about, the disparities in healthcare, racially, economically. Can you talk about that and the kind of work that you're doing and the awareness that you're raising surrounding that, and like what you'd like to change?
Yes. Well, it's where do I even start?
I know that's a big topic. We could do 2 hours alone on that, right?
Totally. I think the part that is so important, I think, for people to understand, it's like, even as an educated person, like Black woman, that the statistics for me are still far different than, my white counterparts, so I am twice as likely or 3 times as likely to die in childbirth than than my white counterparts. And so, and so part of it is, economic, part of it is, I think a lot of medical bias, more importantly. I feel, I think it's been very important for me to, talk about the fact that I had a great medical team that was made up of women and also women of color, because I think that diagnostically and how, that shifts, how our symptoms are viewed and also treated, because sometimes we don't necessarily present with symptoms in the same way that our white counterparts are, and I keep saying our white counterparts because that's kind of how we get measured, and so, so it's like, okay, we're a higher instance of cervical issues, higher instance of, gestational diabetes, higher instance of hypertension and pregnancy. So, and so I think it's like, when you have a team that recognizes, okay, you're at a little bit of a higher risk for this, the care it shifts. And so I think for me, what I noticed with my team that was good that I haven't seen with some other people, it's like they were very intentional about follow-up, and making sure that is monitored weekly, that, we had a kind of a multifaceted kind of approach to, like my support and at first I was really frustrated by needing to see all the doctors and all the testing that was, being done. And I was like, it felt like overkill. And then at the same time, it's like, no, they're really trying to be thorough because, there's just ways that just, that I'm just trying to stay on top of things, I think is what, I'm trying to say. But I know that, the disparities are there because you just, a lot of times there are mixed diagnoses that are happening because with people, we come to the doctor's office and our symptoms, we don't talk about our symptoms in the same way. So they might get missed too. So it's, I think a lot of factors kind of going into that. And so, and I think representation matters. And so I think that's why I talk a lot about that on my platform and trying to raise that awareness so that, and I'm also doing some work behind the scenes. I'm part of the American Society for Reproductive Medicine's mental health professionals group. And so part of the work that I'm doing is, trying to create and hold space for other clinicians who are working, with people of color so that, there's space for others to learn how to do the work too. And because, it's needed. It's definitely needed.
Thank you for listening today, guys. I hope you enjoyed Loree's story. Definitely check her out on Instagram at Dr. Loree, Loree Johnson. And she has great posts and she's super motivated to help women everywhere and men. So definitely reach out to her if you need anything or want to talk to her further. I also want to encourage you guys to check out Fertility Rally if you're looking for community and a sisterhood that gets it. We are growing every month. It's been the most fun I've ever had working on something. I mean, it's fun and it's hard and it's all the things, but I'm so passionate about it. Blair and I have created this incredible community and we would love for you guys to come and check it out. We are actually starting another support group too, that if you become a member, you have access to. So we have 3 support groups a week now. We have 2 private Facebook groups. We've got tons of content, events, IRL events. We're starting to plan Fertility Rally Live for April, our 4th one. So come and see what we're talking about. We'd love to have you no matter what you're going through. All right, check us out on Instagram at Fertility Rally or our website, which is fertilityrally.com. And I will talk to you guys next time.
At Kroger, we believe in higher standards for fresh. So we do up to a 27-point inspection on our produce. Like for oranges, we check for scarring and sunburn, allowing only the best produce to reach our shelves. Because when it comes to fresh for everyone, we believe the juice is worth the squeeze. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
And now you'll find more ways to save on your favorites. When you download digital coupons, you can use up to 5 times in one transaction. Kroger, fresh for everyone.